Well, I'm delighted to be a columnist at the Resident, formerly the Portugal Resident, now the Resident, and host, of course, of the new Resident podcast. So it's a delight, an honour today to talk to the boss of the Portugal Resident, the Resident and Open Media, Bruce. Bruce Hawker, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Carl. Great to
How are
be
you
here.
today? How are you? How is it's winter in the Algarve? What's that like?
It's a beautiful day today. I reckon today we'll probably get to about 18 degrees. Beautiful sunshine outside, and it's chilly, obviously, but it's a typical beautiful Algarve winter day today.
Excellent. It's great to be talking to the boss, finding out a bit more about you. You run the Open Media Group, of course, of which the Resident is a part. And it's a great story, the whole the backstory of where Open Media began, and actually your connection to Portugal. I'd love to talk to you about that, if I may. How you got to be connected to Portugal in the first place? Can we start there?
Yeah, okay. So I moved here in 1978. So I think that's 47 years ago, if my sums are right, and didn't have much choice in that decision. That my parents moved here, so obviously at 11 years old I came with them, and they put me in an international school. Originally there was a little international school in Armaçao de Pera called Escola Nova. I then went on to when that closed, to the international school in Val de Lobo, and then went on to Portuguese to do my O-levels, and left school at 16 after my O-levels because I absolutely hated it.
Did you? So you had a childhood, basically, and an education in Portugal just a few years after the Carnation Revolution. Quite an interesting time to be here in Portugal.
Yeah, but we actually first came just after the revolution, actually, on a vacation with my parents, and they just fell in love with the place, and eventually in 78 they uprooted, and down we came.
Oh, right. And did you share that view? Or as a kid, I guess it's just all you knew.
Yeah, obviously I've got strong recollections of living in England as a youngster, and I probably went through periods of 10 years without going to the UK. These days I go regularly. Actually, my three kids, who were all born here in Portugal, now aged 36, 35, and 29. They were all living in the UK. The eldest has been living in the UK, I think, for 15 years now. My daughter, she was living in the UK for 10 years. So she went there like them to do her university, ended up meeting her partner, ended up they bought a house together in the UK, but they've actually just moved. They've done the right thing. They've moved to the Algarve. They're
doing the right thing.
They moved down last year, and they're enjoying life here now.
The apple returning close to the tree then in the Algarve. How fantastic. So how did you get into publishing and the newspaper business?
Yeah, so we'll probably go a bit back before that. My first job on leaving school was actually selling potato crisps.
Like you do? Selling potato crisps in the Algarve?
In the Algarve. There was
how does that work?
A very eccentric Englishman by the name of Jerry Knight. So we're talking, this was probably 1982. Yeah, it would have been 1982. And he got a little warehouse that he rented in Portimao, right next to the cemetery. And put in a few chip fryers. A team of ladies frying, some machines to close the chip bags, and created Crick Crack crisps. Now, I wonder if there's anyone in the audience of the podcast today who remembers Crick Crack crisps in the Algarve, because they were actually the first ever flavoured crisps in Portugal.
What a claim to fame! You were there.
Yeah, well, I was his salesman, basically. I suppose I can get away with this now, but I didn't have a driving license. I had a photocopy of my brother's English driving license. I was 16, probably close to 17 years of age. And my mother had a beaten up one of those plastic Citroen Maharis. And I used to load it up with boxes of crisps, take the back seats out, load it up with boxes of crisps, and I would drive up and down the Algarve from Villarreal to San Antonio to Sagres, built up over 100 outlets selling these crisps, and including Apollonia Supermarket in its infancy. So,
Incredible. Head of sales for Crick Crack Crisps in the Algarve as a teenager.
It was just me. Somebody else took over after. I did that for about a year. And then, so we would be talking 83. My father, who was he was a bit of a entrepreneur, who was always coming up with business ideas, and he'd seen a free newspaper in the UK, which was a new thing back then, free distribution newspaper.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And he'd seen this in the UK and thought, okay, why don't we do this? None of us knew anything about journalism, about publishing, absolutely nothing. So we found out about a design company in the Algarve, Atelier du Sol. Fred Phillips, who runs that, who's a very old friend and close associate of ours over the years. His company, Atelier du Sol, designed the first edition. My dad knew that I was good at selling, so he sort of brought me in to do the selling, and my brother was involved as well. There was another guy involved at the beginning. And yeah, I started selling advertising instead of crisps, and it absolutely flew.
A fairly easy transition by the sound of it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we were printing 20,000 copies of this free distribution rag, basically. I mean, there was no journalism in it at all. It was a couple of articles that a few friends had written. Most of the articles didn't even change from one issue to the next. And anyway, that sort of grew and became something more serious. Eventually, I became more and more involved. My brother kind of exited the business. My dad got out of it. And so basically, it became my baby. And I employed a journalist. So this would have been about 87, I think. An English journalist by the name of Roger Green, who sadly passed away a few years ago. Roger really was one of my mentors. As far as I knew nothing about journalism. He came in, and he was an old Fleet Street hack. Worked on the Daily Mirror, also used to publish his own collecting magazine called Collector's World in the UK before he moved down to Portugal. But he was an artist, very bohemian type, slightly bohemian type. He was an artist. He ran an art school in Burgao in the Algarve. And but basically, I think he needed a bit of money, so started writing for us, and eventually became the editor of the Gazette. And then it started to become a more serious publication. We started to employ a few other freelance writers, professional writers, and it kind of grew and morphed in. And that kind of eventually, that title, the Algarve Gazette, we were hit by a very hard recession in the Algarve, which a lot of people have forgotten, which was during the first Gulf War. So the Gazette run every month from, I think it was April of 1983 until sometime in 1991 when the first Gulf War broke out. And basically everybody stopped traveling, everybody stopped buying property, everything ground to a halt back then. So other publications that existed in the Algarve at the time were wiped off the map. The Gazette, we couldn't sustain it. There was no advertising then. So I basically changed it into a magazine called Algarve Golf and Leisure. Originally in English and German. The German, as we came out of that blip of a recession, it was very quick. That the German tourism was growing apace, and golf was the big new thing.
That's amazing. So a magazine in English and German simultaneously.
English and German, and that was called Algarve Golf and Leisure. And then at that time, we had a bit of publishing background. We started doing a lot of custom publishing. So we produced a magazine for the Pestana Hotel Group, for example.
Did you?
Pestana Lifestyle. We run it. We did Unique magazine for Quinta do Lago for over 10 years. We did Villamora's magazine back in the 90s. So custom publishing was an important part of the business. In fact, just this year, actually, we still do a bit of custom publishing. We've just produced the 15th anniversary magazine for the Martin Yal results. You know, Chitra Stern, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Hoping to have her on the resident interview here one day as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's a real visionary, as is Roman.
Yeah.
And so they commissioned us to produce their 15th anniversary magazine. And likewise, a couple of years ago, we produced a hardback book for Kids of the Largo's 50th anniversary. So custom publishing is still part of the business. But anyway, to cut a long story short, we then launched Essential, the Essential Algarve magazine. This is a recent edition of the magazine here. So it's a coffee table magazine that's been running for 25 years now, Essential. So we launched that in June 2000. So this year is our 25th anniversary year on Essential. But we were actually hit by another very, very hard recession, the big one. In 2009, actually, although it officially started in 2008 with Lehman Brothers, but it was 2009 by the time it really hit hard here in Portugal, and the bottom fell out of the business. By this time, we had Essential Algarve running, Essential Lisbon, we had Essential Madeira running. I'd produced a special edition of the magazine in Ireland called Essential Portugal Irish edition that was distributed on sale. We launched it with a Irish national TV advertising campaign in Ireland. It was sold all over Ireland, distributed free at golf clubs. So basically, the business had really was really booming at this point. But then suddenly the advertising revenue, which is mostly what we survived from, the digital wasn't really anything back then. Obviously, it was just in its infancy, and our advertising revenue dropped by 80% in a period of a few months. So from the beginning of 2009 until spring of 2009, and it was very, very, very tough. So by 2010, things were very, very grim. And I was bailed out a bit like Greece.
A bit like Greece. Yes. Yeah.
By someone who's become a great friend, actually, Karl-Heinz Stock. He's a German investor. At the time, he owned a winery here in the Algarve, which he sold last year. And he invested in the business, basically put some wind back in our sails. And it was at that stage that we decided to do a few steps of expansion, really. The first thing was an international project where we took Essential into other countries. We'd already done Ireland, obviously, that had fizzled out. The first one was Macau, China.
Well, I've got a copy of that here. That's the one, is it not?
Yeah, that was one of the first. I think it was actually the first edition. So that was April 2011.
Yeah.
That we launched that magazine. And I always say, actually, it's a bit like Red Bull. Essential gave us wings.
Right.
Essential is the project that really has been the backbone of the business.
Yes.
And so we launched in Macau very successfully. It ran for 10 years, actually. It was COVID that eventually wiped that one out. But during that period, we also launched Essential in Malaysia, where we published bi-monthly as well. So Macau was bi-monthly. We did an Essential Kuala Lumpur. And we even did Philippines. We got a couple of editions out in the Philippines as well, always working with local expat publishers. So in Macau, obviously, ex-Portuguese colony, we were in partnership, 50-50 partnership with a Portuguese publisher, a guy called Paulo Azevedo, who still owns Macau business. He actually lives here in the Algarve now. So together we had a very successful little magazine running there, and while really the revenues here in Portugal were still extremely low, that became really our cash cow at the time.
Amazing.
From 2011 to 2016, I suppose, when it was really good. And that was the same period that we did Malaysia. We exited that in 2010, I think it was. Sorry, not 210. Sorry, we started in 210. So it would have been 219, 220 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And but really, the international side of the business was something that was now in our DNA. And I remember in 2019, we had our, actually it was for the Portugal resident. So backtracking a bit again, in 2012 and 2013, we took over the resident, which is now 36 or 37 years old. The resident, we took that over in 2012, and then 2013, we also took over Barlavento, which was the longest existing Portuguese language.
Yes. Well, I want to ask you about that one. I mean, clearly, we are the resident podcast, and we'll talk about the Portugal resident now the resident. But Barlavento, this is a great way for the foreigners to learn Portuguese, to read this newspaper. I'd not heard of it until recently.
You can actually click on a button, and there's an AI generated translation to English as well.
So is there really?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, so it's actually very, and this is everything in there is about the Algarve. So yes. This ran in print for 49 years. So really? Last year we stopped the print. It was no longer viable in print. There wasn't enough newsstand sales or advertising to sustain it anymore. But we kept on the team of journalists, and they've done a great job in really just in the full digital transition. So the web traffic this year has grown by over 30%. And it's a very highly respected publication, even now that it's only online rather than in print. But this really
15 years. I mean, that's quite the institution, isn't it? To have it,
it is
in the Algarve,
and it's really positioned us helped to position us as a Portuguese company. I don't see us as an expat company. I never have.
Right.
I'm completely fluent in Portuguese, completely bilingual. I speak Portuguese all day at work. And it was a totally natural thing for us to have a Portuguese language publication.
Yes.
Actually, when we first launched Essential back in 2000, it was English-German bilingual, because that was really a transition from the other magazine that I mentioned. But after a few years, we changed it to Portuguese. And so today, Essential Algarve continues for many, many years now as English Portuguese. And I know we have many loyal readers, Portuguese lawyers and doctors and dentists and other people who love reading the magazine in Portuguese. And we obviously have an online version as well. But Essential really is the backbone of the business, and but very, very important as well would be the resident and Barlavento, that really they're the core products. We have some other publications. We have the custom publishing arm, and then we have the some more tourism related titles, the inside magazines that we publish. You've probably never seen them, but they sort of slot in below Essential. Essential is the more for the sort of luxury. I hate the word luxury, but the high end market. So the inside magazines are for restaurants to advertise, for local attractions to advertise in. And we do one edition of Inside for Lagos and the West, and another one for Carvoeiro and the Central West.
And where do people find these usually then, Bruce?
They're distributed free of charge. We actually have distribution agreements with some supermarkets where we produce special covers for them. So Baptista supermarket in Praia da Luz, the Intermarché supermarkets have a special edition with their own front cover. So we have a guaranteed readership through those supermarkets. So tourists going in to get their shopping, they pick it up. And then it's distributed around guest houses and restaurants and hotels and so forth. So
what an amazing adventure! So you really know publishing and newspapers here in Portugal and specifically in the Algarve. Incredible milestones. That's the 25th edition, isn't it? 25th anniversary edition of Essential.
25th anniversary year. So the actual 25th anniversary edition will have been the June July edition this year.
Yeah.
This is that the one we're showing there is the I think that's the October-November edition.
Amazing.
So we're just about to bring the December-January edition out, which will be the last celebratory edition of the year with the 25th anniversary logo.
Very, very good. And 50 years of Barlavento, and perhaps we can talk as well. Incidentally, we'd love to hear from anybody who remembers Crick Crack Crisp, the Algarve Gazette, and Barlavento in the early days. It'd be lovely to hear from people who've had a few memories triggered by Bruce's adventure as we're hearing it. I mean, an amazing life here in Portugal, and a good time, I think, to talk about The Resident. Which is, of course, the around which this podcast revolves. We have our news review on a Friday with Natasha Don, journalist at the Resident, and a resident interview every week. Bruce kicking it off, and we'll talk to somebody notable in Portugal every week, who will be associated.
Unlike me.
Well, thanks for getting it started, Bruce. So yes, The Resident, another milestone, 36 years. I mean, these are big numbers in publishing, aren't they? To be involved with so many long-standing titles is quite an achievement, I think.
Yeah, I think the important thing with print, I do believe in the future of print, but print has to be kept relevant,
right?
And relevant to advertisers, relevant to readers. But we still sell a decent number of copies of the Resident in print. I can't believe we didn't call it The Resident many years ago, because everybody's always called it The Resident or The Resi for short.
The Resi, yeah.
Or The Resident, but it started off as the Algarve Resident, then it became the Portugal Resident. We changed it to the Portugal Resident shortly after we took it over, actually, because we felt that the news that expats wanted to read, even though most of our readers are in the Algarve, wasn't just about the Algarve. They wanted to read news about the whole country. So It didn't make sense being the Algarve Resident, so Portugal Resident. And then we decided to give it a refresh this year, a redesign. So linking in with the 36th anniversary edition, it was also the edition that coincided with one of our events that we hold. So we changed it to the Resident now with that new look, and we're very, very happy with it.
I love it. I do love the typeset, the new look, the spacious look is great. If I just bring it back onto the screen again there, so everybody can see it. Yeah, there you go. There's the new header, as reflected in the print edition, and that's all over. I mean, people do imagine when I say to people, because I've got a column in there. I love writing for the paper, and I'll say to somebody, you can buy that. You can buy that in my town of San Martino de Porto, a little seaside town. This is available all over the country, isn't it?
It is limited, so basically it will only go into the newsstands that sell a decent number of foreign language titles. So if you've got a shop in your town that sells foreign language titles, then it will have the Resident. But 90% of the circulation is here in the Algarve, and it always will be.
Right. Okay. And where's it going to go? I mean, you've weathered a lot of storms, haven't you? A Greek-style bailout under the first Gulf War, all sorts of challenges that you've navigated successfully and survived.
We actually have another partner buy into the business as well. So there's now 3 of us partners in the business. Englishman by the name of Richard Lambeth.
Right.
Who's also one of the partners, I think, for about 7 or 8 years now. So yeah, and turning the clock back again to 2019, I think I was just about to say before, because where are we going now? What is the business? It was the 30th anniversary party of the Resident, which we held at the Tivoli Carvuero Hotel in November 2019, and by this stage, I had already basically come up with the plan of where we're taking the company now. And I remember I put up on screen when I did a presentation an image of 3 pillars. And basically those 3 pillars are events, print, and digital. And our objective, the plan, is basically to have roughly equal revenues eventually from each of those pillars. At the moment, the biggest pillar is events. We've actually become more of an events company than a publishing company these days, in terms of revenue. So we organise events promoting residency, investment, Portugal in general, around the world. So South Africa, Brazil, Canada, mostly the USA. We currently run around 20 events a year. Which
that's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, what an operation!
Yeah, and what these events do also is they keep the publications relevant. So, for example, we're going in. When are we going? The next international events will be in the end of January in Texas. We're going to Austin and Houston. This isn't our normal road shows internationally are called the Living in Portugal shows. So there we'll have a mixture of companies with us, relocation, removals company. We'll have healthcare and health insurance. We'll have law firms and some real estate and various different aspects of life. So people will come along all under one roof. They will get all the information that they need about moving to Portugal, about living in Portugal. We're now doing a slightly different take on that. So we're starting to go purely investment focused. The Living in Portugal shows will continue. We'll still have 9 of those already booked in the US for next year, for 2026. But we're doing an additional 2 events at the end of January and beginning of February, focused solely on the Golden Visa. So these are called Portugal Property and Investment. So there we've just got an investment fund as the main sponsor, a couple of law firms, a couple of other companies. We've got a language school joining us as well. So, but smaller events. So this is something that we're going to be working on as well. But when we have one of these events, we take along our publications with us. So we'll take along an edition of Essential with a special front cover. We rebrand it as Essential Portugal. We'll make sure there's some interesting content in that edition related to people who want to invest here or move here. And we take them with us, and we distribute a couple of 100 copies of the magazine at the events in goodie bags. We also take the resident along with us in print as well. And advertisers love this. It's something, and it does work because it's getting the newspaper and the magazine directly into the hands of people in the US or wherever we are in other countries, into the hands of people who want to come here, invest here, live here. So it works. It works extremely well, and it's helping to keep the publications relevant.
And those 3 pillars: events, print, and digital.
So the big challenge for us now is getting the digital working properly.
Okay.
That's the focus for growth at the moment. Is definitely on moving forward. This podcast is part of that.
Yes, indeed. And here we are into our first episode of the resident interview. If there's somebody you think we should speak to, a notable person in Portugal, we'll do that. We'll get in touch with them and endeavour to get them interviewed here on the resident interview. And of course, Natasha Don's Friday news review as well. So 2 a week. Subscribe at all your usual podcast platforms. In conclusion, I'd like to find out a little bit more about you personally and your hopes for the country that became your home, and the amazing story of beginning selling crisps from the back of your mum's car, and now this publishing digital and print empire here. And some of it actually, Bruce, sounds a bit like a lot of this is a ruse for foreign travel. I think you've got a fondness for Essential here, there, and everywhere, going to America and South Africa. Does this satisfy a particular personal penchant for world travel as well?
I do love to travel, yes. It's become a bit much, actually. I mean, obviously, the novelty wears off after a while.
Yes.
I've done over 50 flights this year. And and that really does wear you down. So the novelty wears off, definitely. But that said, when it comes to our annual vacation, my wife and I still travel long haul, not to the US. We travel to Asia. We're both avid scuba divers, so we
really?
We go on a diving holiday every year to somewhere, Indonesia or somewhere like that.
How lovely!
And as I say, one thing, the interesting thing also is the Faro Airport now. I've written for the upcoming edition of Essential Algarve, the December-January edition, timed because this is the time of year that people think about their holidays. It's the busiest month for holiday bookings is January. So I wrote an article for the magazine called Outbound Algarve, which is about the destinations that you can fly to directly from Faro Airport.
And it's impressive, isn't it? It's an impressive list.
It is. So during the sort of busier months of the year, there's actually 96 destinations that you can fly to directly from Faro. Now it's down to about 50 or 60 during the winter, but it's still impressive. In the winter now, we can still fly. There's 3 flights a week to Toronto. Then I was in Vienna this weekend, just a cheap Ryanair flight and a lovely long weekend in Vienna. And the Azores. I went to the Azores once. We actually produced an edition of Essential in the Azores once.
Of course you did.
It was only one edition, sponsored by the Azores Tourism Board many years ago, and that's the only time I've ever been to the Azores. But we can now jump on a plane in Faro year round, even in the winter, and fly direct to the Azores with SATA Air Azores. So I think it makes living here for people who have got itchy feet a lot more interesting.
Well, an amazing base. So a great place to live here in Portugal, clearly. The Algarve, a great place to be based. And when you get to the punishing 12-degree low temperatures, you can fly off somewhere hot, as Bruce is describing there. And a full list in the upcoming Essential magazine about that. What's the article called, Bruce?
Outbound Algarve.
Outbound Algarve. And just finally then, your hopes for the country. I mean, these are interesting times the world over. Portugal remains, in relative terms, a fabulous place to be. What are your hopes for the country in its world standing?
Yeah, my hopes are, obviously, we have to stay attractive to international tourism, to international buyers for real estate. But all of this is really, there's a strong headwind against us, which is obviously the lack of housing for locals who can't afford to buy property, and likewise to some extent over touristing. Especially in Lisbon, I think. Here in the Algarve, obviously, we have over-touristing in the season in July and August. But the rest of the year, it's most of the time, it's blissfully quiet outside of the Easter weekend.
Yes, remember that, everybody. Yeah.
But Lisbon, I know Lisbon very, very well. For probably 20 plus years, I used to go to Lisbon every single week. I now go once a month. And you see more tourists on the street in Lisbon now than you do locals. So that's got to be balanced. I'm actually not against clamping down on the AL on tourism rentals in places where over touristing is a real problem. I mean, obviously, you can't do that in the holiday resort area. You can't do that in resort areas of the Algarve or even Ericeira up near where you are. That absolutely wouldn't be viable because tourism is the lifeblood of the country. There's got to be a balance, and it's got to be done with some intelligence and care. And then I'd like to see affordable housing. I would really like to see the government creating incentives for developers to invest and create affordable housing. Because the main problem, everybody talks about how the golden visa drove up prices of real estate, which is absolute bullshit. The number of people that bought property through a golden visa is a tiny percentage of the overall figure during that time when real estate qualified for the golden visa. It really is a case that we're not building enough property in Portugal. I should have had the figure here, but it's something like, I think it was 15 years ago, we were building over 80,000 new homes a year. And currently it's something like 15,000. My figures may be slightly wrong.
Yes, we get the point. It's drastically, there's a drastic deficit, isn't there? And it's really much needed.
The population is growing, and there's not enough housing. It's quite simple. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see more affordable housing, and I'd like to see an intelligent balance in terms of controlling over touristing.
Well, we will review that situation. I'm sure we'll talk to you again on the resident interview. Thanks for kicking this off. And you tune in next week where you get your podcasts delivered, the news review and the resident interview. Bruce Hawker, boss of Open Media and the resident, thank you very much for talking to me. For strangely enough, I have a little bit of an appetite for crisps. I need to go and get a bag of crisps.
You won't find Crick Crack.
If anybody's got a bag of Crick Crack and the original graphics, send us a picture. Cheers, Bruce. Thanks very much indeed.
Bye.